the single, horrifying realization of a naval architect. The moment the warship slid down the ways, every other fighting vessel on Earth became instantly obsolete. This was not merely a new ship, it was a sea change, a revolution in steel and steam that started a ruinous, decades-long arms race between the world's two greatest powers. This obsession with the biggest gun and the heaviest armor would lead directly to the ultimate naval clash, a battle both sides wanted desperately and simultaneously feared above all else. It was the clash of 100,000 sailors, and the only time two superfleets ever fought. 3 hours of sheer firepower wiped out 14 British warships. Germany claimed victory. Yet, days later, the German fleet was locked in port and never sailed again. This was the Battle of Jutland, the tactical win that guaranteed strategic defeat. This is the story of the only battle where the greatest prize was not collected by anyone who survived the fight. The revolution began in 1906. The arrival of His Majesty's ship Dreadnought was not an evolution, but a sudden, violent upheaval. Prior battleships had carried a mixed bag of guns, some large, some medium, which made calculating firing solutions a difficult, confusing task. The Dreadnought dispensed with all that confusion, mounting 10 12-inch guns of a uniform caliber, creating the all-big gun doctrine. Powered by steam turbines, she was also the fastest battleship in the world. This single ship had rendered all previous fleets, including Britain's own, worthless overnight. It was a reset button on the global naval power, and Kaiser Wilhelm II's Imperial German Navy was quick to seize the opportunity. Germany saw its chance to close the gap. The resulting Anglo-German naval race became a core driver of the descent into the First World War, an arms spiral of increasing size, speed, and gun caliber. Britain's strategy was simple, rooted in centuries of tradition: to maintain a fleet large enough to defeat the next two largest navies combined, the so-called two-power standard. For the British Empire, the fleet was not an offensive weapon. It was a shield, the absolute guarantor of the global trade that fed the entire nation. Losing the fleet meant losing the war, and losing the empire. Germany's naval philosophy, championed by Admiral Alfred von Tirpitz and later executed by Admiral Reinhard Scheer, was a dangerous gamble known as the Risk Fleet. Germany could not hope to match Britain ship for ship, so the goal was to build a fleet of such quality and power that even if the Royal Navy brought its full might to bear, the German high seas fleet could inflict enough damage to put the British at risk. Germany's focus was on quality, better compartmentation, superior flash protection for magazines, and heavier armor relative to their British counterparts. The high seas fleet was built to absorb punishment and stay afloat. In contrast, the British focus was on overwhelming quantity, speed, and the size of the gun. This led to the creation of the battlecruiser, a sleek, fast vessel that sacrificed armor for speed, armed with the same heavy guns as a battleship. The British coined the term fast battleships. The Germans, less dramatically, saw them for what they were: vessels whose heavy weapons made them look like predators, but whose thin skin made them fatally vulnerable. The British commander of the battlecruiser fleet was Vice Admiral Sir David Beatty, a dashing, bold figure who wore his cap rakishly cocked, the darling of the London press, and a commander known for aggressive, often reckless action. He was the spearhead of the Royal Navy. Overseeing the entirety of the British Grand Fleet, 151 ships in total, was the Commander-in-Chief, Admiral Sir John Jellicoe. Jellicoe was a man defined by meticulous caution, methodical planning, and the knowledge that he held the fate of the entire British Empire in his hands. Winston Churchill once famously declared that Jellicoe was the only man on either side who could lose the war in an afternoon. Jellicoe never forgot that immense, terrible responsibility. His opposite number, the German Admiral Scheer, was newer to command, aggressive and desperately seeking the decisive battle that would break the suffocating British blockade. Both men commanded the most expensive, complex, and potentially lethal machines ever built by human hands, all based on a doctrine of a single, decisive, Trafalgar-like day battle that had not yet materialized. 2 years into the war, the dreadnoughts remained silent, locked in a standoff that consumed resources but had not yet spilled blood. This tension was the foundation of the war at sea, a fragile stalemate waiting for one fateful decision to shatter the peace. By the spring of 1916, that decision had been made. Scheer, determined to force an engagement on his own terms, formulated a plan, a feint by his battlecruisers to lure out the detached, aggressive British battlecruiser force, then ambushing them with the entire high seas fleet. The stage was set. The great ships moved out. On May the 31st, the two colossal fleets began their slow, silent convergence into the murky expanse of the North Sea, each side sailing with confidence, each side confident of its own brilliant strategy, and each side fatally misinformed about the other's location. A single mistake, a single unexpected sighting was all it would take to unleash the doomsday fleets. The North Sea on the afternoon of May the 31st, 1916, was an ocean of secrets, a vast grey expanse veiled in mist and low visibility, perfectly designed to breed chaos and confusion. Two colossal fleets, the most powerful armada ever to put to sea, were barreling toward the same patch of water, yet neither commander possessed the full picture. The British, thanks to their code breakers, had an inkling of the German sortie, but intelligence errors led Admiral Jellicoe to believe the German fleet was still hours behind its actual position. The Germans, for their part, believed the bulk of the British Grand Fleet was still safely anchored far to the north. Everything depended on chance. That chance arrived at 1400 hours, 28 minutes, when a single small fateful sighting was made. Two light cruiser squadrons, one British and one German, stumbled upon a neutral Danish freighter. The cruisers immediately saw the smoke of the enemy, and the first shots of the largest naval battle in history were fired. This was the opening act, the long-awaited meeting between the German 1st Scouting Group, led by Vice Admiral Franz Hipper, and the British 1st and 2nd battlecruiser squadrons, led by Vice Admiral Sir David Beatty. The speed of the battlecruisers was breathtaking, and the two forces plunged into a high-speed chase that became known as the Run to the South. The distance quickly closed to 16,000 yards, then 15,000 yards, the extreme range for accurate gunnery. The battle began with a stunning, horrifying revelation for the British. Within minutes, the powerful German battlecruisers, firing with legendary accuracy, found their range. The British flagship, His Majesty's Ship Lion, was hit, sending flames soaring into the air. But the true catastrophe struck Rear Admiral Hugh Evan Thomas's 5th Battle Squadron, lagging slightly behind the faster battlecruisers. The German fire, concentrated and precise, tore through the British vessels. At 1600 hours, two British battlecruisers suffered the ultimate dreadnought vulnerability. A shell slammed into His Majesty's ship, Indefatigable, piercing a turret. Moments later, a second hit caused a massive, internal explosion that sent fire racing down the ammunition hoist into the main magazine. The ship was obliterated in a colossal column of smoke and fire. Barely half an hour later, His Majesty's ship Queen Mary suffered an almost identical fate. Another direct hit, another catastrophic magazine explosion. The ship broke in half, disappearing beneath the waves in an instant. The scene was one of unparalleled horror. Two massive symbols of British naval pride, each carrying a crew of over 1,000 men, disappeared in fire and smoke. But the truth was far worse than a missed shot. This battle was about to reveal a fatal flaw built into every British supership. The British crews were paying the ultimate price for the design flaws baked into their ships. Their vessels lacked the superior flash protection of the German vessels, and the Royal Navy's drive for rapid-fire gunnery meant safety doors were frequently left open, and massive silk bags of cordite propellant were often stacked outside the magazines. This terrifying lack of compartmentalization allowed a single well-placed German shell to ignite a chain reaction that ripped the heart out of the superships. Surveying the wreckage, Vice Admiral Beatty, his own flagship badly damaged, turned to his flag captain and uttered the line that would forever define this stage of the battle. "There seems to be something wrong with our bloody ships today." Yet, despite the losses, the aggressive nature that defined Beatty would not let him turn away. He believed he was chasing only a scouting force, unaware that far ahead, the entire 24-ship German high seas fleet was racing toward the sound of the guns. He was not the hunter, he was the lure. If you are finding this deep dive into naval strategy and the chaos of combat compelling, please subscribe now and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the rest of this incredible story of technology, strategy, and tragedy. The British battle cruisers had paid a terrible price, but they had successfully drawn the German trap further north, directly toward the unsuspecting, overwhelming might of the Grand Fleet. The price of speed was proving lethal, but this bloodied, battered scouting force was about to complete the greatest decoy in naval history. The run to the south became the run to the north, as Beatty's surviving battle cruisers spotted the main German high seas fleet, 22 full battleships, and immediately reversed course. Vice Admiral Scheer's trap had sprung, but the trap was now running directly into an even bigger snare. Scheer and Hipper had successfully lured Beatty, but in doing so, they had sailed blindly toward the silent 29-ship battle line of Admiral Sir John Jellicoe's Grand Fleet, the very force the German strategy was designed to avoid. As the German battleships emerged from the mist, Admiral Jellicoe received the confusing, often delayed, and sometimes outright incorrect reports from Beatty. Jellicoe knew he had one chance, one perfect moment, to deploy his massive force. His dilemma was immense. Deploying too early or too late would throw his entire battle line into chaos, leaving his precious dreadnoughts vulnerable to torpedo attack or ineffective firing angles. The decision had to be made in seconds, and it had to be perfect. Jellicoe chose the most decisive maneuver in naval history, the deployment onto the port wing. With clockwork precision that spoke to years of disciplined training, the entire Grand Fleet performed a maneuver that unfolded like a colossal, synchronized ballet. 151 ships turned simultaneously, transforming the scattered columns of the cruising formation into a single, terrifying line of battle, 24 miles long. The maneuver placed Jellicoe's force directly across the path of the oncoming German battle line, achieving the devastating position known as crossing the T. It was the perfect geometry of naval warfare. The German ships, sailing straight ahead, could only bring their forward guns to bear, but the entire British line could unleash the full, devastating power of its broadsides, a simultaneous barrage of over 115-inch and 13.5-inch shells per minute. For the German fleet, it was a moment of supreme, stomach-dropping terror. they had sailed into the single greatest concentration of naval firepower ever assembled. The British shells began to rain down, not in scattered shots, but in organized, devastating salvos. The German lead dreadnoughts, particularly the SMS König, were shredded by the massive shells. Scheer realized in an instant that his fleet was seconds away from annihilation. The entire balance of the war was hanging on this single, desperate moment. Scheer's response was a maneuver of staggering discipline and speed. At 1835 hours, he ordered the Gefechtskehrtwendung, the battle turn away, a complete, simultaneous 180-degree turn by every battleship in the line. This required every ship to turn in its own water at the exact same moment, maintaining formation and discipline under a hail of fire. It was a testament to the rigorous training of the German high seas fleet. The massive German battle line vanished into a massive cloud of artificial smoke and mist. Scheer had saved his fleet, but only temporarily. The British, still holding the powerful crossing the T position, relentlessly pursued. By the time Scheer's ships emerged from the haze, Jellicoe had executed a second, even more brilliant maneuver, placing the Grand Fleet in position to cross the T a second time. Once again, the German fleet was met by a torrent of shells. Scheer had gambled, and he was now facing total destruction. Scheer had saved his fleet once, but Jellicoe knew he'd only given the German admiral a single, impossible choice: turn around and face annihilation a second time, or risk a nighttime charge that no modern admiral dared to attempt. This time, the German admiral understood that a conventional retreat was impossible. He needed a sacrifice to save his main force. Scheer's second encounter with the Grand Fleet was his moment of truth. Facing annihilation, he ordered the most desperate and brilliant maneuver of the day. He sent his already battered battlecruiser force, led by the indomitable Admiral Hipper, on a seemingly suicidal charge straight into the line of the British dreadnoughts. This was not a move of attack, but of sacrifice, a distraction to draw the British fire while the main German battle fleet turned away again. Simultaneously, Scheer ordered a second, even more shocking sacrifice: a mass torpedo attack by his destroyers. These small, vulnerable vessels were to steam directly into the path of the massive British battleships, forcing Jellicoe to turn his entire line to avoid the torpedoes, and, crucially, breaking the deadly crossing the T formation. It was a gambit of iron will, trading the people on his light forces for the survival of the Dreadnought fleet. The charge worked. The British battleships shifted fire to the charging battlecruisers and the oncoming torpedo boats. Jellicoe, ever the guardian of the Empire's destiny, faced a moment of excruciating decision. To pursue the German battle fleet meant steaming directly into the path of the oncoming torpedoes, risking one of his precious, irreplaceable capital ships. To turn away meant losing contact with the enemy, allowing the German fleet to escape. Jellicoe chose the safety of the Grand Fleet. He ordered a 6-point turn away from the torpedoes, a maneuver that saved his ships, but allowed Scheer's main body to slip away into the gathering twilight. As the sun set, the battle devolved into a chaotic, terrifying night action. Jellicoe, determined to keep Scheer bottled up, steered his fleet south, hoping to cut off the German line of retreat toward their home port. Scheer, however, knew the British commander's mind, and with audacious cunning, chose the single most dangerous path. He drove his high seas fleet straight through the rear of the British light forces. The night became a dark, smoky, and utterly confusing maelstrom of destruction. German battleships, navigating by luck and sheer guts, slammed into British destroyer and light cruiser squadrons. Engagement ranges dropped from 15,000 yards to a mere few hundred. Searchlights stabbed into the darkness, locking onto targets, followed instantly by the devastating roar of guns firing at point-blank range. In one tragic sequence, the old British armoured cruiser, His Majesty's ship Black Prince, was caught alone, suddenly bathed in the blinding white light of 4 German ships. She was entirely destroyed in a series of shocking explosions, her entire crew perishing without a trace. This chaotic night action defined the German escape. Scheer's battle-worn dreadnoughts, absorbing punishing close-range torpedo hits and shell fire, pushed through the British light screen. The British command structure, which worked perfectly in the daylight, failed catastrophically at night. Crucial sightings of the fleeing German capital ships by British light forces were either not reported or did not reach Admiral Jellicoe in time. This failure of communication allowed Scheer to execute the last part of his masterfully managed escape, weaving past the stern of the British Grand Fleet. Jellicoe had been outmaneuvered not by superior naval genius, but by a combination of daring sacrifice, a reliance on German technical superiority in ship construction, and a failure of British signalling in the dark. By the time the first grey light of dawn broke over the North Sea on June the 1st, the German high seas fleet was racing for the safety of its home ports. The decisive day battle both sides had planned for was over. What remained was the staggering aftermath. The sun rose on June the 1st, 1916, illuminating a vast expanse of ocean littered with wreckage, oil slicks, and the ghastly remnants of 2 massive fleets. The British Grand Fleet, intact but shaken, conducted a fruitless sweep of the Skagerrak. The High Seas Fleet had escaped. The massive naval engagement that was supposed to decide the war had ended not with a bang, but with a paradoxical withdrawal. The world waited in stunned silence for the news. When the figures were finally compiled, the tactical reality was brutal for the British. The German High Seas Fleet had lost 11 ships and approximately 3,058 people. The British Grand Fleet had lost 14 ships, including 3 battle cruisers, 3 armoured cruisers, and 8 destroyers, alongside over 6,094 people. On paper, the numbers were clear. The Germans had caused more vessels to sink and incurred fewer personnel losses. Vice Admiral Scheer immediately claimed a spectacular tactical victory, declaring that the High Seas Fleet had delivered a severe blow to British naval prestige. All of Germany rejoiced, believing they had crippled the Royal Navy. But the tactical figures masked a profound and enduring strategic reality. The core of Jellicoe's force, the 24 Dreadnought battleships that formed the main line of battle, was not only intact, but ready to steam again. The damage the Germans had inflicted, though grievous, was not enough to challenge the fundamental balance of power. The very next day, 28 British dreadnoughts were ready for action. The High Seas Fleet, though tactically successful, was battered and bruised. It had lost the initiative and had been decisively proven to be strategically inferior. The most important outcome of the battle was that the German High Seas Fleet never seriously challenged the Grand Fleet again. Jutland had proven that in any open water confrontation, the German fleet faced destruction. The Royal Navy, despite its tactical losses, maintained its control of the North Sea. The British blockade, the strategic weapon slowly strangling the German war effort by cutting off all raw materials and food, remained firmly in place. This was the strategic victory that mattered. Britain had lost a battle, but it had won the war at sea. Jutland, therefore, delivered a powerful paradox, a German tactical win that cemented a British strategic victory. The colossal, ruinously expensive dreadnoughts built for the great, decisive sea battle, had proven too valuable to risk again. Scheer knew the Grand Fleet could absorb the losses and return. His fleet could not. This realization immediately changed the war. Recognizing that the surface fleet was essentially imprisoned, Scheer urged the Kaiser to unleash the unrestricted submarine warfare, a desperate, ruthless gamble that targeted neutral and civilian shipping. This aggressive use of the U-boat was the final defining consequence of Jutland, a move that alienated the United States and ultimately brought America into the war, proving that Scheer's strategic defeat on the surface had forced the fateful move that would guarantee Germany's eventual downfall. More than 5,000 years of naval history had led to this single 36-hour clash. It was the only time the two great Dreadnought fleets ever met in open combat. It was a victory claimed by both sides, and yet won definitively by neither. But in the final assessment, the fleet that remained on the ocean, the one that kept the vital sea lanes open, was the fleet that ultimately carried the day. If you found the blend of high-stakes action and deep historical analysis in this script engaging, make sure to share this story with any history buff you know. The Siege of Belgrade showed us that history is made by the biggest hearts. Jutland proved it is also made by the cold calculus of naval philosophy, where the greatest ship ever built, the Dreadnought, was rendered an impotent giant, too expensive to be sunk and too vital to be risked. The dream of a decisive, glorious Trafalgar was buried in the cold North Sea. This powerful story of technology and strategic sacrifice is just one of the incredible battles that shaped our world. Subscribe to our channel to make sure you never miss a deep dive into the history that matters. And comment below to let us know what piece of history you think deserves to be told next.